Hey, book lovers. Welcome to While I Read. I'm Katie Dodrell, and today I'm going to talk about the cozy mysteries and thrillers that I am most excited to read in April. I have to say, it seems like April is leaning pretty heavily toward some cozy mysteries, and I am here for it. As always, all of the books that I talk about will be linked down below in the description box. If you click on that link to buy the book, I'll get a small percentage of the proceeds as an Amazon associate, and that'll be at no extra charge to you. That's just a way you can support my channel if you're interested. So let's go ahead and get started talking about these books. First, let's talk about Vera Wong's Guide to Snooping on a Dead Man. So this is the second book in the Vera Wong series, the sequel to Vera Wong's Unsolicited Advice for Murderers. So, full disclosure, I have not actually read the first book in this series, but I want to. It has been on my TBR list for so long. This sounds like such a good series. So Vera Wong apparently runs a tea shop and has sort of a very quiet life, maybe a little bit of a sad life, but in the first book, she discovers a dead body and ends up getting caught up in the investigation. And so now in this book, she's happy. She has a good relationship with her son. Her son is apparently dating the police officer who was investigating the murder in the last book, or the first book in the series. But Vera is a little bit bored. So she meets this young woman, and Vera wants to help her, and the woman is talking about a friend of hers who vanished. And then somehow Vera is able to get into her son's girlfriend's briefcase, the police officer's briefcase, and she finds a file on this missing social media influencer named Xander. And it turns out this guy is the same one that the young woman was asking her about. So, of course, Vera can't resist getting involved in this case. So she starts finding out more about Xander, and it seems like he's very, very rich, but also very mysterious. And so the book is all about her figuring out what happened to Xander and probably having some zany hijinks in the process. So I've heard from so many people that the first Vera Wong book is really good. So I definitely want to read that first one and then get started on this one. Next, keeping it on the cozy side, is a book in the Molly the Maid series, and that is The Maid's Secret, which is number 3 in the Molly the Maid series. So again, I have to confess, I haven't read any of the books in the Molly the Maid series. I really want to. My mom has read at least the first one and said that it was really good, so I need to catch up on this series. So apparently Molly is a maid at this luxury hotel. It sounds like maybe she's neurodivergent, like it says she has trouble with social skills and understanding people's intentions. And so in the first book, she's suspected of a murder. She investigates it and finds out the real killer. And so now in this third book, she is the esteemed head maid and recently promoted special events manager of the Regency Grand Hotel. And she's also engaged, going to be married soon. So this reality show is filming at her hotel, and it's where people can bring in like items, and the people on the show will look into them and see if these old items are worth any money. Appraisers, that's what it's called, like art appraisers. So Molly brings in some things of her grandmother who had died just as the first book was beginning. And it turns out that something of her grand's is actually really valuable. And so then Molly ends up finding an old diary belonging to her grandmother. She starts looking at it and finds out some long buried secrets about her grand's past. So these books just sound so fun and cozy. Molly sounds like a great character to follow. So again, I really want to get started with this series and read this most recent book in it. So next, I want to tell you about The Last Session by Julia Bartz. This is definitely not cozy at all. This is a thriller. So this is being published on April 8th. I actually read an arc of this back in January. It was actually the first book that I read in 2025. And I gave it 3 stars. I liked the book. I didn't love it. It was very fast paced. I, couldn't put it down. But it was also very over the top. So it's about a social worker named Thea who meets this woman. This woman comes into the clinic where she works, and she's in a catatonic state, but she ends up, becoming lucid enough that she and Thea talk a little bit. They have some interesting similarities. They actually look a lot alike. And then the woman vanishes. And so Thea figures out that she has gone back to this wellness retreat in New Mexico. So Thea follows her to that wellness retreat. She's posing as somebody who just wants to go there and, get her life right at the wellness retreat. And so it quickly becomes very obvious that this wellness retreat is a cult and they are doing some pretty shady things. I'm not giving anything away. It tells you this in the synopsis. So basically reading it, I just kept being annoyed because Thea was stupid to stay in this cult where it's obvious that she's in danger, and everything was just way over the top. Some pretty crazy, shocking things happen in this book. So, like I said, I couldn't put it down while I was reading it. I was interested in it, but it really is not one of the best books that I've ever read or anything like that. So if you're looking for a good time, kind of an over-the-top time, you could pick up this book. Next, I'm excited to read This Is Not a Game by Kelly Mullen. This sounds like it could be a little on the cozy side, but it also sounds like a really good mystery. It's got a lot of the tropes that I enjoy, like an isolated island and a snowstorm. It's about a young woman named Addie who goes to visit her grandmother on Mackinac Island, which is apparently this isolated island. Addie has had kind of a tough time. She and her fiance Brian had designed this video game that has been really successful, but now they've broken up and Brian is like cutting her out of the profits from the game somehow. So Addie goes to spend the weekend with her grandma on this island, and they go to a party. This big storm rolls in, trapping everybody at the mansion. I love that. Of course, a body is found because that's what happens. Addie and her grandmother are caught up in a dangerous game, relying on their skills. Mimi loves a crossword puzzle, and Addie is a brilliant game designer to narrow down the suspects. So this sounds like a really fun book, and I'm excited to pick it up. I'm also excited this month to read Ruth Run by Elizabeth Kaufman. So this is about a 26-year-old cyber thief. Basically, she has created some kind of hacked firewall chip that only she knows how to access, and somehow she robs banks with this. I don't really understand how that works. Usually in books like that, I just go with it. Whatever they tell me, sure, she's done this. So anyway, she is robbing banks and, making a lot of money doing this, but then an alarm goes off and she realizes that she's been caught. So she's on the run across California and the West with these government officials chasing her. Basically, they either want to put her behind bars or possibly get her to work for them. And she doesn't want either of those things to happen. She's on the run armed with her ironic wit and a reluctant dog. I don't know where the dog comes in, but that was really what made me want to read this book. I really like a fun heist chase kind of book. And then it talked about the reluctant dog, and I was like, oh, that sounds good. So this sounds like a really exciting book to read this month. But next, I'm excited to read the thriller The French Honeymoon by Anne-Sophie Johano. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that name. So it's about a woman named Taylor Quinn. She arrives at her honeymoon suite in Paris, but she is alone and apparently has wads of stolen cash. So things have not gone the way that she planned for them to go. So she sees this honeymooning couple who seem just so happy. They seem to have everything that she wants. And so she gets kind of obsessed with this couple. The woman in the couple, Cassie, posts everything on social media, so it's easy for her to follow them on social media. She's very jealous of this couple. But then she overhears a heated argument between this couple, and it turns out that they aren't just this love-struck couple that they're pretending to be. So they have their own agenda. Taylor ends up getting involved and ends up being in more danger than she expected. So sounds like a fun location, Paris. It sounds like a fun character to read about. So this looks like a fun thriller to try this month. Next, we have another book in a series where I haven't read the first one in the series, but I want to, and I want to read this one. So this one is How to Seal Your Own Fate by Kristen Perrin. It's number 2 in the Castle Knoll series. The first one in that series was How to Solve Your Own Murder. And I actually started that one. It was published last year in 2024 and didn't finish it. But I really want to go back and try to read that one because this series just really sounds like something I would like. So it's about this young woman named Annie Adams. In the first book, she has inherited this house, Castle Knoll, this English estate, from her great aunt. Her great aunt was convinced, since she had a fortune telling years ago, that she was going to be murdered, and then she actually was murdered. So Annie had to figure out who the murderer was. So in this one, Annie is living at Castle Knoll. She's just getting settled in when a local fortune teller pops up and shares a cryptic message. After she shares this message, she is found dead. So Annie ends up investigating this murder. This book, like the first one, goes back to 1967, looking at Annie's great aunt Frances, who is the one that she inherited the house from. So we sort of have dual timelines here. So I really want to read these books. I want to give the first one another chance because this sounds like a series that will be right up my alley. Next, I want to tell you about A Death on Corfu by Emily Sullivan. This book is set at the turn of the 20th century. It is about a woman named Minnie Harper living on the island of Corfu. Apparently her husband died and she has raised their 2 children on her own. Now the children are getting older and she realizes that it's time for her to sort of make some changes in her life. So she ends up being offered a job as a typist by this novelist who is on the island of Corfu, living near her, I guess. So she takes the job and then she discovers a maid in his house is murdered. So she ends up getting caught up in this web of deceit and excitement as she tries to solve the murder. So it sounds like a pretty exciting book. I love the setting of the island of Corfu. One of my favorite Mary Stewart books, This Rough Magic, is set on Corfu, and so that just is a great, I love that book, and so I'm looking forward to reading another book with that setting. That's it for the books that I'm excited to read in April. What book are you most excited to read this month? I'll put mine in the comments. As always, if you liked this video and want more book recommendations and reviews, please subscribe to my channel. Now, go take an allergy pill while I read.